that Hebrew word. And it literally means black hair for youth. So while you still got black hair, I guess. Is that what? Is it?
If you never had black hair.
Well, well, if you were an Israelite, that's unlikely, I think.
Right.
But yeah.
You're young before it turns gray.
Yes, before it turns gray, it kind of means. But again, this is the only place where that Hebrew word occurs, and it's translated youth, childhood, and black hair or vanity. So, talk about that, Patrick. So he's saying, I guess, rejoice, reflect, and remember, but when will we ever know everything? Never. Yeah. Patty.
Isn't it, I don't know if he's saying this or not, but you don't keep acting like you're 20 when you're
Well, that's
60.
part of the message, yes. I think you can read that right into that.
That's
Yeah.
for a time.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're not going. We're going to go on and talk about that some more. You're going to come to a point where you can't do all those things that you did and that you rejoiced in a few years ago. You're going to come to a point where you don't even want to go try that.
Yeah.
Huh? All right, let's read on a little bit, because as I say, this thought continues. In chapter 12, verse 1, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. That's what I was talking about a minute ago. We'll expand on that just a little bit. It said, while the sun and the light of the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim, when the doors are shut in the street and the sound of the grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of a bird and all the daughters of music are brought low. Also that they are afraid of height and of terrors in the way. When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden, and desire fails, for man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. And let's stop there and think about those verses for a minute. Again, when he stood up and said these things originally, I'm sure there was great understanding among the people. But in translation and so on, we blur this a little bit. It was not intended to be, here's how it is. It's intended to be, here, think about this. Okay? So remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and when you say I have no pleasure in them. If you have a Bible like mine, you might have a reference there to 2 Samuel 19, and I want to go look at that. 2 Samuel 19. This is in the story about when David was fleeing from Absalom. And then in chapter 19, Absalom is killed, and David goes back to Jerusalem. But let me preface this also with a verse from 2 Samuel 17 that, if I find the verse here, verse 27, 2 Samuel 17, 27. Now it happened when David had come to Mahanaim, that Shobi the son of Nahash, and from Rabbah of the people of Ammon, Machir the son of Amiel from Lo-debar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Enrogel. They brought beds and basins, earthen vessels, and wheat, barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey and curd, sheep and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. They said the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So when there was this war between Absalom and the house of David, David took all of his kids and all of his servants and they fled Jerusalem. They got out of the palace. They got out of the house where he lived, and they went across the Jordan River over into the land across the river, the land of Gilead, the land of where the tribe of Manasseh and some of those people were there. This man, apparently from the tribe of Manasseh, because he's a Gileadite, this Barzillai brought him provisions. And they had fled with nothing, and these people came, these gentlemen came and fed them. So then that in chapter 19 now in verse 34, but Barzillai said to the king, now this is when they're headed back to Jerusalem, and David wants to reward Barzillai for bringing them this provisions. Barzillai said to the king, how long do I have to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? He invited him. He says, I'll keep you in food. I'll just provide for you as long as you live now, if you want to do that. He says in verse 35, I am today 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and the bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any longer the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden on my lord the king? And if you read on, he doesn't go back to Jerusalem with them. He provided for David and his household while they were in Gilead there, but he, on being invited back to be repaid by the king, he declines. And he says, it's because I can't taste anything anyhow if I'd go eat your food. And I can't, if you have a celebration, I can't even hear those people singing. He says, I'm just going to go home, and I'll be happy to do that. So you see here the contrast between an older person. You don't have the desires, and that's the reason that this reference is probably in your Bible. The years draw nigh when you say, I have no pleasure in them. So think about the people who are young, the people who have the black hair, the dark hair, no gray hair. They're in a situation that's not like this. And so that's what Solomon says, that's the time to remember your Creator. Because a guy like Barzillai, he's already formed all of his habits. He's not going to change. It's going to be tough for him to get right if he's not right now. So this is the advice that Solomon gives. Do this while you're young. Any thoughts? Any comments?
Well, he talks, is it in, where's it at where he says about redeeming the time?
Yeah, that's Paul talking in,
Paul.
I think that's in Corinthians.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, again, we remember, it says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, but the difficult days come. And that's what you were saying. We're going to, Mom and Dad had us in church every time the doors were open.
Yeah.
And we studied, and we studied, and we studied.
Was there any times that you didn't want to go do that?
I'm sure, I would have never said.
No, right.
But, that when it got time for me to get a driver's license and start running around and get in with the wrong crowd, and then he's telling you to remember those days, but Satan helps you forget those days.
Well, that's right.
And
back in that verse 9, he said, remember that, and God's going to bring it back to judgment. So get right, get on the right. I've heard it said that you develop the habits that you're going to have all your life by the time you're 30. After 30, you're not going to change the way you do things, and I know that worked for me. I don't even wear other clothes. I like this stuff, and that's what I wear. So, and I get scolded about that at home, but those are the things. So so then he goes on in these other verses to talk about this, where he says, well, the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are not darkened. Does that mean that the sun will be darkened? No, it means they won't be able to see what the sun's doing. You won't be able to see by the light of the moon. After you've got that gray hair, after you've had that gray hair and carried it around for a while, things happen. And I never dreamed that a guy like me could get old so young. You know, begging.
I want to challenge it a tiny bit.
Okay.
Well, let's say somebody who's 70 moves here, and we need to be talking to them, we need to be.
Oh,
listening to
yes.
them, we need to share.
Oh, yes, we,
They're gonna have to potentially change some habits.
that's right.
It isn't impossible.
No, that's exactly right, but it's tougher. It's tougher. Yeah, I remember we had a guy in the baptistry here that was 92, and he was just so tickled to finally learn what the Word said, finally learn what the Bible, because he'd been taught something else all his life, and apparently he'd never looked into it himself or anything. So yeah, that works. And also remember, Barzillai was 80 years old. That's how old Moses was when God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Yeah, no, you don't give up. But what he's pointing out, I think, is you're going to be better off to do this sooner rather than later. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You've lost time. You've developed habits that are going to be tougher, and those kind of. And as I say, when you get so far along there, you say, "Well, it ain't worth it. I'm not going to do," and you just go back to Gilead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, after you read through all of Ecclesiastes, a young person reading through it could get kind of depressed about everything. Oh, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. And I don't think that was the intent of what God sets us up in our youth.
Yeah.
I think, Cain's probably using this as an opportunity, like, hey, a reminder, you are in your youth. God kind of set these things up for you to have that energy and really enjoy these things.
Yes.
Don't let that cloud your future.
Yes. Later on in the chapter, he's still talking about, be admonished, my son, it says there in verse 12 and some of those things. So yeah, this is advice now to how to, this is part of the operator's manual for yourself. This is, but, Randy, you have something going?
Well, yeah, kind of, but that's the same guy that said here in 11:9, to walk in the ways of your heart, also said in Proverbs 28:26, that he who trusts in his own heart is a fool.
Oh, yes.
And so you're on track, but what he's saying is, you're gonna do this anyway, but
Yes.
there's a better way, and you are capable of doing it the better way.
Back in, I don't remember which chapter, he says, I even tried wine and all that kind of stuff. But he didn't say, don't bother. He just said, that's nothing. So, yeah, and I think, again, he's writing about his own experience, but he's inspired to do it. Tell just exactly what God wants known about this. Corey.
That's what's been said a couple times with verse 9 here today, that they're going to go out and do it anyhow. I would never want to tell these kids that, hey, you're going to go out and do this kind of stuff. Yeah, we did this, we
Yeah.
sowed a wild oats or something like that. I come from the mindset of, I don't want to tell my kids everything that I've done.
No.
And so when I read this, I see it as, and this is him preaching, so I see it as him preaching, saying, verse 9, and at the very end of verse 9, to say, but know for all these, God will
Bring
you in judgment.
Right.
And then in the verse 10, so remove from your sorrow this idea that you can't do certain things and that you need to follow God instead. Put away the evil from the flesh.
Right.
For childhood and youth are just
But he doesn't seem to point out that your life is a vapor too. He doesn't seem to point out that you don't know if you're going to make it till tonight, even though you're only 20 years old or whatever it is. You can't be sure of anything. That's a fact, but it's not pointed out here. Yeah. Go ahead, Randy, and then
But
Mark.
anyway, when he says put away sorrow, then he explains how you do that.
Yes,
By getting rid of evil, by starting working on being faithful to God while you're young, and not wait until you're so old that all you have left is regrets.
yes. And then these, oh, Mark, you had some.
I was gonna say, no
Excuse
matter
me.
what you did, with that verse, verse 9, it says, well, no matter what you do, you're gonna have to answer to.
That's right. That's right, you're right. But in these other verses that we just read, these are euphemisms for other things, I think. In verse 3, when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men bow down, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim. I think that's talking about your body when you get old. The keepers of the, maybe your legs or your arms, the grinders. We get our word molars because they grind. And so I think, again, translation is difficult sometimes, but the grinders cease because they are few. When you get older, and particularly in that time, the older you got, the more teeth you lost and that kind of thing. Those that look through the windows grow dim. What's he mean there? That's your eyes. So you're gonna get decrepit. And those. What are you laughing at?
Because I've used it.
I'm just picking. But that's the case, and that's what I think he's pointing out. So you got important things to think about before that happens, because if you keep going, it's going to happen. It's just we don't keep going forever. Dick.
Thought just occurred to me that the younger person can't see that it's ever gonna happen to them.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't see that age will creep up before you know it, and that it's not gonna happen.
That's right.
They're
But
living in a different plane of thought, different
right,
world.
yes. And then whenever it gets to verse 5, he talks about man going to his eternal home, and mourners go about the streets. So that's the end of everybody. And he's given, I guess, mostly young people, here's something to think about. Then I want to read, before we quit today, I want to read verse 6 and 7 at least, where he says, Ecclesiastes 12, verse 6, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. And then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. And we'll probably begin there next week. But this silver cord is loose, golden bowl is broken, pitcher shattered at the fountain. We don't know exactly what he's telling those people there, what he's telling us, because again, it's metaphorical, it's euphemisms for these things, and this is one of those places where the commentaries are just crazy about this stuff, but they mostly admit we don't know what he's talking about. But it does seem to indicate, in the wheel broken at the well, that seems to be talking about the wheel that you let the bucket down with, and that things just get tougher and tougher. Things go bad. This golden bowl and this silver cord, it's an indication that something, maybe in your body, maybe in your life, maybe otherwise, is not going to be the way you wanted it to be. And then the dust will return. And we'll talk about that. Go ahead, Randy.
Not just remember your Creator before you get worn out,
Yes,
broken.
yes. Which is a better time to do that. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was. and the spirit will return to God who gave it. And that is something that's referenced many, many, many times at funerals, and it's referenced, thoughts about that are referenced in the New Testament. But this is alluding to the fact that Adam, in chapter 2 of Genesis, says that from the dust of the ground he formed man. And then in chapter 3, he tells them, dust you are, and to dust you shall return. But he says the spirit returns to God who gave it. Now, in a previous chapter, we talked about the spirit of man that goes upward and the spirit of animals that goes down to the earth. And these are some of the only places where you get statements like that to compare New Testament things to and how we think about things. But the dust does return to the ground. And if Adam was formed out of dust, he decayed back into that dust. And all of the elements in Adam's body return back to the earth, to the soil, to the whatever. But the spirit of Adam, what happened to it? Went back to God who gave it. And so when God formed Adam out of the dust of the ground and then breathed the spirit of life into him, the spirit goes back to God. And that's how everybody who was and is ever alive, that's what happens. Your body returns to dust and the spirit goes back to God. And go ahead.
You know, don't we talk about, you know, the water of life, you know, the word of God, I mean, it springs forth from
Yeah.
it. There's Isaiah chapter 12, verse 3, I'm going to start at verse 2, it says, behold, God is my salvation, I will trust and not be afraid, for Yah, the Lord, is my strength and strong, he also become my salvation. Therefore, with joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation. So is that kind of what he's talking about here? Or
It's part of
it's broken at the well because
well,
are we not
that could be, yeah. Could be a reference to something like that. Again, the original audience probably knew more about what he was talking about because they were familiar with euphemisms and phrases in Hebrew, but he just, you know, is talking plainly to them today. It's kind of lost on us, but we do know that it indicates that by the end something could go wrong by the end of our time. And then the dust goes back to the earth and the spirit back to God. So it is our spirit, and when we come back to be judged, and we've talked about this many times, but we'll be given that spiritual body. You know, it won't be this old worn out too fat body that we've got now, or it won't even be the ones of somebody who died when they were a youth. It'll be a spiritual body. It'll be recognizable as a body. We'll see each other, whatever it is, but it won't be made of physical things because the dust went back to the earth. And what happens to the earth? The elements melt with fervent heat, Peter tells us in our Bible Bowl study. So we have those words of wisdom, and we'll begin, we'll go back over the dust returning and so on next week. Thank you for your attention and for your participation and for being good sports about all this stuff.